Hello. My name is Brooklyn Hale, CEO, architect of empires, daughter of a woman who once threw my MIT acceptance letter into a flame like it was junk mail. I built an entire automotive empire from scratch, while my family convinced the world I'd disappeared. And today? I walked into my own showroom. And they tried to throw me out. The glass in front of me shimmered with Texas heat, catching the reflection of a woman I barely recognized. My hand hovered near the handle, the air conditioning from inside whispering against the doorframe. Behind that polished glass was everything I had built, every late night, every ignored call, but at that moment I felt like an intruder. I pushed the door open and stepped into the showroom. Light spilled across the marble floor, clean and perfect, like the world that had never made room for me. I could smell leather and new paint, hear the faint hum of engines sleeping beneath fluorescent light. Men in suits drifted from car to car with champagne flutes. Women in silk dresses practiced laughter sharp enough to cut through air. No one greeted me. Not a nod, not a smile. My shoes clicked too loudly against the marble as if announcing I didn't belong. Then I heard it, my mother's voice. "Now this," she said, running a hand along the side of a yellow Lamborghini, "this is class." Sable's laughter followed. "You could never pull that off, Mom. That color's for someone young." Their voices drew the sales staff like bees to perfume. I froze. It had been 3 years since I'd seen them. 3 years since I left their house with a duffel bag and the taste of silence stuck to my tongue. I'd told myself I was over it. But hearing them now, inside my own showroom, felt like salt poured on a scar that never healed. Valora turned first. Her smile faltered. "Brooklyn? What are you doing here?" My throat tightened. "Looking," I said. "This isn't your kind of place," she added, smoothing her blouse. Sable leaned against the car door, glossy hair catching the light. "Brooklyn, you should try Honda. It's more achievable." The words landed softly but cut deep. Around us, the staff pretended not to listen, yet every smirk confirmed they were. I wanted to tell them that every light in this building burned because I signed the checks. That the air they breathed carried my signature. But saying it would have felt like begging. Instead, I smiled, the way I learned to do at 15 when Dad forgot my birthday dinner because Sable had a dance recital. "I didn't realize success had a dress code," I said quietly. Sable rolled her eyes. Still defensive. "Some things never change." A salesman approached them, sleek suit, slick grin. "Ladies, shall I get the keys? We have a special package for our preferred clients." Preferred. The word buzzed against my skin. Valora turned toward me again, voice low but sharp. "Brooklyn, maybe wait outside? You make the staff nervous." I swallowed. "I think they're fine." Her tone hardened. "Don't embarrass us." I stepped closer to the car, the Huracan, the model that started it all, the one I'd sketched on a napkin in my first design meeting 10 years ago. My fingertips hovered above the paint. I didn't touch it. I wanted to, but I couldn't. It wasn't the car that hurt. It was their assumption that I didn't deserve to. A memory surfaced, Dad's old garage, the smell of oil and rusted bolts. I was 12, handing him tools while he rebuilt a carburetor. "You've got good hands, kid," he'd said. "Careful hands." Those hands trembled now. Sable's fiancé walked in, the kind of man who always looked at you like he was calculating interest. He wrapped an arm around her waist. "You ready, babe?" "Almost," she said, kissing his cheek, eyes flicking toward me. "Just catching up with family." Family. The word soured in my mouth. The salesman handed her a key fob. The beep echoed across the showroom like laughter. My chest burned. I could hear my heartbeat, steady, heavy, too loud. "Let's take it for a spin," Sable said. "Of course," Valora replied. "I'm sure she can watch." The salesman laughed under his breath, then offered them his arm. "Right this way." I watched them disappear toward the back doors, followed by a small crowd of staff and admirers. No one noticed me still standing there. A receptionist at the front desk glanced up from her computer. She looked me over once, then offered a polite, empty smile before returning to her screen. The world kept moving like I wasn't even air. I turned back to the cars. Each one gleamed under its own halo of light. They looked perfect, but I knew their flaws, the micro cracks beneath the polish, the tiny imperfections no one else saw. I built this empire from those cracks. My phone buzzed in my pocket. A message from Elia, inspection finished. Heading to the next branch. You good? I typed back, almost done here. Almost done pretending. A whisper of laughter floated across the room. Two salesmen at the reception desk were watching me. One leaned to the other, said something that made the other grin. I caught the words, window shopper. I exhaled slowly. You're right, I murmured to myself. That's exactly what I am. My reflection stared back from the showroom glass, layered over the reflection of the cars. I looked both inside and outside at once, exactly where they wanted me to be. Belora's voice carried from behind me again. She'd returned, clutching her purse. I told them we were family, she said to the salesman, but she doesn't listen. He smiled uncomfortably. Of course. Families are complicated. Sable laughed. She's not complicated, she's stubborn. Always thought she was smarter than everyone else. They stood 3 feet from me, talking as if I were invisible. My mother's perfume, a mix of gardenia and control, filled the air. My sister's laughter cracked like glass. I heard you're working. Somewhere? Belora asked. Something small? I smiled softly. Something like that. Well, that's good, she said. Keeps you busy. I turned away before the anger could find words. The marble under my shoes felt slick, like walking on a lye polished too well to hold weight. The salesman asked Sable if she wanted to finalize the paperwork. Belora glanced at me again, her face composed. Don't linger, Brooklyn. It's not appropriate. For years, I had chased that look, the one that said you are enough to be seen. But all I ever got was the reminder that I was background noise in their perfect picture. I thought of Dad again, the way he'd once told me, if they can't see your worth, make them see the results. I wasn't here to argue. I was here to measure the silence. The showroom pulsed with quiet wealth, with the hum of entitlement. I inhaled slowly, the scent of leather heavy in the air. My jaw tightened, but my heart stayed steady. Belora's voice rose behind me, louder this time, sharp enough for everyone to hear. You don't belong here, Brooklyn. Don't make this worse. Heads turned. I straightened. My reflection on the Lamborghini door caught her face beside mine, hers, painted and perfect, mine, plain but real. I turned to face her. You said that before, I said quietly. And you were wrong then, too. The staff froze. Even Sable stopped smiling. Belora blinked, caught off guard. Excuse me? I stepped closer, keeping my tone calm. You taught me how to smile through being ignored. I learned it well. I paused long enough for her to feel it. But today I'm done smiling. For a second, I saw something flicker in her eyes, fear, maybe, or the start of understanding. The air felt still, like the moment before thunder. I turned back to the car, let my fingers hover again over its smooth surface. I whispered to the quiet room, to the ghosts of every insult, this time, I'm not here to ask for a seat. I'm here to measure the silence. A soft hum from the air vents trembled above me. The silence I had measured filled the room like smoke, invisible but choking. My mother turned her attention back to the salesman, her laugh forced, thin. The moment between us, sharp as glass, passed, and she pretended it hadn't existed at all. A man in a gray suit approached my sister, holding a tray of champagne. Would you care for something bubbly while you wait for the paperwork? His smile widened when he noticed the ring on Sable's finger. She slipped her hand onto her fiancé's arm, showing it off like an achievement. The server looked past me without a flicker of recognition, lowering his tray toward her. I didn't move. Excuse me, a younger employee said gently, not looking me in the eye. We only assist confirmed appointments. I'm sure someone can help you at reception. Confirmed, I repeated, the word dry in my mouth. He cleared his throat. Yes, ma'am. Otherwise, we ask that guests not loiter. My mother chuckled. It's fine, she's just tagging along. Brooklyn has a habit of showing up where she shouldn't. Her tone was casual, dismissive, polished from decades of practice. I wanted to laugh, but the sound stayed buried. The urge to remind her that this was my property, it pulsed under my tongue, but I swallowed it back. There would be a better time. Sable's fiancé whispered something to her, and both of them smiled at me. I turned toward the silver Lamborghini at the center of the showroom. The metal reflected the fluorescent lights in long ribbons. I could see my face stretched across its curve, distorted, fragile. The smell of wax and engine oil pulled me somewhere else. I was 17 again, sitting on the porch steps, sunlight warm on my knees. I'd opened an envelope with trembling hands, the crimson letters at the top spelling Massachusetts Institute of Technology. The world had gone still for a heartbeat. I'd run inside to show my parents, chest bursting with pride. Dad had smiled, tired but proud. "You did it, kiddo." But Valora's eyes had flicked toward Sable, who sat at the kitchen table, silent tears in her eyes. "You'll break her heart if you go," she'd said softly. "Can't you see she's struggling?" Sable sniffled. "I'm happy for her, Mom." I knew that tone. It wasn't happiness, it was rehearsed pain. Valora sighed. "It's not just about school. Think about family. You can't abandon your sister when she needs you most." My acceptance letter trembled in my hands. "It's MIT," I whispered. "She can apply next year," my mother said. "You're strong enough to wait." "She isn't." Dad said nothing. He looked at me, then looked away. That was the day I stopped believing silence was neutral. That afternoon, I signed the withdrawal form. I told myself it was fine, that sacrifices made you noble. But years later, standing under the same Texas sun, I realized it hadn't been noble. It had been a quiet execution of my own dream. Back in the showroom, my chest ached. The silver Lamborghini shimmered under the lights, almost mocking me. I learned early that you don't have to do anything wrong to disappear. You just have to shine a little too brightly next to the wrong person. A soft voice cut through my thoughts. "Ma'am, are you all right?" It was the same young employee. His tone carried politeness but not warmth. "I'm fine," I said. "Just looking." He hesitated. "Security will need to know if you plan to." I raised my eyes. "To what?" He flushed. "Nothing, ma'am. I'll check on something." He walked away quickly. I exhaled, my heartbeat steadying. Shame had a weight that settled behind the ribs, quiet but constant. My mother's laughter rose again near the reception desk. "It's not easy raising two daughters," she said to the salesman. "One of them listens. The other, well, she always thought rules were optional." The man laughed politely. Sable turned, voice dripping sugar. "You still trying to figure out what you want to be when you grow up, Brooke?" She called me Brooke the way some people say charity case. "Don't start," I murmured. "Oh, come on," she said, her tone faux sweet. "It's just a joke." I smiled gently. "You were never funny, Sable." Her fiancé let out a soft, awkward laugh. "Ladies, let's not." Sable cut him off. She never could take a joke. "Remember when Mom said she'd run that little business of hers straight into the ground? You cried for a week." Valora sighed. "That's enough." I turned my head slowly. "Don't stop her, Mom. She's just telling stories." My mother frowned. "This isn't the time." "I don't think it ever was," I replied softly. The words lingered. Even the hum of the showroom seemed to pause. Sable's lips parted, but no sound came. She looked around, realizing people were watching. She recovered with a grin. "See? Always so dramatic." The sales staff chuckled lightly, the kind of laughter that fed off discomfort. I reached for the railing near the car display, gripping it gently. The cold metal steadied me. The weight of years pressed into my chest but didn't break me. Inside, I felt a slow clarity, something old shifting, unfolding. I wasn't angry. I was something older than anger. I was the quiet ache of women who had learned to breathe through humiliation, generation after generation. A salesman motioned toward the door. I saw his lips form the word security check. Valora noticed, embarrassment coloring her face. "See what you've caused?" she hissed. I turned back to her. "You taught me this, remember? Keep your head down, make everyone comfortable. It's what I'm best at." Her expression faltered. For the first time, I saw uncertainty. Sable folded her arms. "You never learned your place, did you?" I smiled slowly. "I did. I just outgrew it." The air between us tightened. Valora's mouth opened, then closed. I looked at them both, mother and daughter, bound by image and fear, and realized how small they looked standing under the lights that were mine. Softly, gently, I stepped back. "You should finish your paperwork. Wouldn't want to keep the staff waiting." The young employee reappeared, holding the tray of untouched champagne. He didn't meet my eyes. As I walked past him, I caught a glimpse of my reflection in the glass doors again. The woman staring back wasn't invisible anymore. She was simply waiting for the world to catch up. When I stepped out of the showroom, the Texas sun pressed against my face like a question I didn't want to answer. The air outside felt heavier than it had when I walked in, thick with the scent of asphalt and car wax. I made it to the edge of the parking lot before I realized my hands were shaking. I wasn't sure if it was from anger or exhaustion, maybe both. I sat in my car, closed the door, and let the quiet settle around me. The screen of my phone lit up before I could start the engine. A notification pulsed at the top, tagged photos from the same showroom. I should have ignored it. But I didn't. The image filled my screen, Sable, standing beside the silver Lamborghini. Her fiancé's arm looped proudly around her shoulders. The caption read, "So proud of our future son-in-law, buying the dream for our golden girl." The dealership's logo sat neatly in the corner, like a stamp of approval from the universe itself. Behind them, I could see the car. My car. My floor. My building. I was standing 3 feet away when that picture was taken, but you'd never know it. They had cropped me out so neatly that it looked like I had never existed there. My absence wasn't an oversight. It was deliberate. I scrolled through the comments, family friends, cousins, old neighbors from our street. "She's glowing. You must be so proud. What a beautiful couple. Your family is goals." My thumb trembled as I reached the bottom. There was one comment from my mother. "My heart is full. My girls are blessed. My girls." I stared at the words until they blurred. The ache in my chest wasn't sharp anymore, it was dull, familiar, the same ache I'd carried since the day she told me that wanting more made me selfish. For a long moment, I couldn't move. The hum of nearby traffic faded into the distance, replaced by a softer sound, the crackle of memory. The kitchen table came back first. The smell of coffee and lemon cleaner. I was 17 again, my MIT acceptance letter trembling in my hands. I'd rehearsed what to say all morning. "Mom," I said, laying the paper down, "I got in." She looked up from her checkbook, pen stilling midair. "Into what?" "MIT," I said quietly. "Massachusetts Institute of Technology." For a second, she didn't speak. Then she smiled, the kind of smile that always came before disappointment. "Brooklyn, that's wonderful." I waited for the rest, for the hug, the pride, but it didn't come. Her eyes drifted past me to where Sable sat on the couch, her ballet shoes half-tied, eyes wide and wet. "Sweetheart," Mom said to her, "don't look so sad. Your time will come." "I'm not sad," Sable whispered. "I'm happy for her." I knew the tone. It was the same one she used at every recital when I got better grades, when someone praised my science fair project. It sounded like love, but it wasn't. It was guilt disguised as grace. Mom turned back to me. "You'll break her heart if you go, you know that?" "I won't," I said. "She has her dance scholarship." "She's still a child," Mom said. "You're stronger. You can wait. She can't handle feeling left behind." "She's 16, I said, my voice trembling. "You're the big sister," she reminded me. "It's your job to make sacrifices." Dad was standing by the doorway, pretending to fix his watch strap. He didn't say a word. "Mom," I whispered, "this is MIT. I can't." She held up a hand. "This ambition of yours, it's selfish, Brooklyn. We raised you to be family first." I looked at Sable, who was biting her lip, pretending to cry. The air smelled of coffee and smoke from the stovetop. My acceptance letter trembled in my grip. "Give it to me," Mom said softly. "I'll keep it safe." I didn't move. I just watched her take it from my hand, unfold it, and slide it into the flame of the gas burner. The paper curled slowly, the ink fading before my eyes. The kitchen filled with that faint, bitter scent of burning paper and broken promises. I didn't cry. I just stood there, frozen, as the edges of my future turned black. Dad looked away. He whispered, almost to himself, "It's for the best." That was the night I learned that silence can kill louder than words. The memory dissolved as another notification chimed. The phone screen glowed again, pulling me back into the present. I turned it face down on the passenger seat. The quiet in the car pressed against my skin. She didn't just burn my letter. She burned the only bridge I had to leave them behind. I exhaled slowly, staring through the windshield. Inside the showroom, my family's voices carried faintly through the glass, laughter, light, rehearsed for the world. When I walked back in, the lights felt harsher. The floor gleamed too much. Every reflection seemed to split into two versions of me, the girl who stayed silent, and the woman learning how to stop. The staff moved around me like a tide avoiding a rock. No one met my gaze. I heard one whisper, "She's still here," and another say, "Maybe she's lost." I smiled quietly to myself. "Not lost," I whispered. "Just not gone." I drifted toward the silver Lamborghini again. Its surface was smooth enough to reflect my entire body, but the image looked fractured by the overhead lights. My face was cut into pieces by reflections of chandeliers and glass. It felt like the truest version of me, whole only when seen from a distance. Across the room, Valora posed beside Sable for another photo. Her laugh was too loud. I could see the tension in her shoulders even from here. She was always performing, terrified someone might catch her family at the wrong angle. Sable adjusted her hair, then turned her head slightly toward me. "Still hanging around, Brooke," she said. "You really don't know when to leave, do you?" I ignored her. Valora sighed. "Brooklyn, please. You're making people uncomfortable." I looked at the salesman who was pretending to polish the hood of a car. "Am I making you uncomfortable?" He froze. "No, ma'am. Just, company policy, that's all." "Company policy," I repeated softly. "Interesting choice of words." He gave a nervous laugh and stepped back. I felt the old pressure in my chest, the familiar mix of humiliation and clarity. The same feeling I'd had at 17 when I watched my mother destroy the one thing I'd earned for myself. The same feeling I carried into every boardroom where they underestimated me. I wasn't angry. I was awake. The family, the employees, the lights, they were all part of a scene that had been rehearsed too many times. The roles had just shifted, and no one noticed yet. I brushed my fingertips across the rail near the car, feeling the chill of the metal. "I was never meant to belong here," I whispered. "I was meant to own it." The salesman closest to me cleared his throat. "Ma'am, you're not allowed to touch that." I smiled. The salesman's voice still hung in the air when I turned away from him. I could taste the smugness behind his words, a practiced tone built to keep people like me out. I didn't react. I had already spent too many years feeding off the crumbs of someone else's approval. "I just have a question," I said, my tone calm, even. "Could I speak to the receptionist for a moment?" He blinked, confused by my composure. Sure." The receptionist sat behind a sleek white counter, scrolling through something on her screen. Her smile was the kind you put on for a camera, not a person. "Hi," I began softly. "Could you check availability for a regional inspection next week?" She looked up briefly, her eyes flicking over my plain clothes, my scuffed shoes. "Inspection? Of what, ma'am?" "Inventory," I said simply. Her lips twitched. She hesitated for a beat, then reached for a small pad. "Do you have an appointment?" I slipped a card across the counter, simple, matte black, unbranded, just my name and a number. She picked it up delicately between two fingers, as if it might smudge her manicure. The seconds stretched. Then, with a faint laugh, she dropped the card into the trash bin under her desk. My eyes followed its quiet descent. The sound it made hitting the bottom was softer than I expected. She smiled, a professional curve of the lips. "We don't take walk-ins for those, ma'am." I nodded once. "Of course." For a moment, neither of us moved. She thought she had dismissed me. She thought that little gesture, dropping my name, was an act of power. But power doesn't come from who you ignore. It comes from who you underestimate. I turned slowly, letting my heels click against the marble. I didn't pick up the card. I didn't need to. She thought I was handing her a request. I was handing her a mirror. As I walked toward the display again, the air seemed to hum. The salesman reappeared, arms crossed, his smile laced with arrogance. "You'll want to try Toyota down the road," he said. "They've got some nice models, good financing, too." I met his gaze. "Do you speak to all women like that, or just the ones who don't match your client list?" He tilted his head. "Relax. I'm just saving you time." My pulse steadied. "I've waited long enough. I can spare 5 more minutes." He frowned, clearly thrown off by my calmness. Behind him, another staff member chuckled quietly, whispering something I couldn't hear. The laughter rippled, small, but sharp enough to draw blood. I stepped closer to the Huracan, my reflection stretching across the flawless metal. My fingers brushed the air above its surface, not to touch, just to remind myself it was real. "This started as a dream," I murmured, more to myself than anyone else. "Now it's an asset. And today, it's evidence." He smirked. "Evidence of what?" I turned to face him fully. That not everyone who walks through these doors needs permission to be here. The sound of my own voice steadied me. Somewhere in the background, I could hear my mother's laughter again, the faint murmur of her bragging about Sable's engagement, the perfect pitch of social performance. They were still in the corner of the showroom, surrounded by strangers who believed every word. Brandon, the salesman, folded his arms tighter. "Look, lady, I've got real clients waiting. Don't make this difficult." I could feel the weight of every eye on me now, employees, customers, even Valora pausing mid-sentence to see if her daughter would finally make a scene worth gossiping about. I didn't. Instead, I smiled. 5 minutes. He blinked. For what? For you to realize what kind of mistake you just made. He laughed, but it sounded forced. What, are you waiting for security to escort you out? Maybe take a selfie before you go? I didn't respond. I simply stepped aside, near the edge of the glass doors, and folded my arms. My mother called across the floor, her tone sharp, embarrassed. "Brooklyn, stop this. You're humiliating yourself." I looked at her gently. "No, Mom. I'm giving you a front row seat to how humiliation really works." She flushed crimson, clutching her purse. "You always twist everything into drama." Sable laughed behind her hand. "She's been doing that since we were kids. Remember when she cried because I got the bigger bedroom?" Their words no longer stung. They landed and fell flat, harmless. The receptionist whispered something to Brandon. He shot me a smug glance, then checked his watch. "Still counting, huh?" "Yes," I said quietly. 4 minutes left. He frowned. "What, you got someone coming to bail you out?" "Because this isn't that kind of place." I let the silence stretch. Around us, the showroom hummed with awkward tension. The young employee who had spoken to me earlier, Noor, her name tag said, shifted uneasily behind the counter. She didn't laugh. She didn't look away either. That was something. Valora exhaled loudly. "This is ridiculous. Sable, let's go. We don't have time for her stunts." But they didn't move. No one did. The minutes crawled, slow and deliberate. I could hear the faint tick of the wall clock. The air conditioning hummed overhead. Brandon rubbed his temples. "I don't know what game you think you're playing." "No game," I said softly. "Just patience." He scoffed, turning to another salesman. "Unbelievable." They laughed again, but quieter this time. Inside, something in me settled. Not anger, something calmer, heavier, older. A kind of knowing that didn't need to shout. I caught Noor watching me again, uncertainty flickering in her eyes. I gave her the faintest smile, and she straightened a little, as if silently rooting for me. 3 minutes. My sister spoke up then, her voice dripping with disdain. "Brooklyn, you can't just walk into a luxury dealership and expect people to cater to you. You don't belong here." Her fiancé chuckled under his breath. "Maybe she's trying to impress someone." My reply was steady. "Maybe I already did." Valora frowned. "What does that even mean?" I didn't answer. 2 minutes. Brandon shifted his weight, impatience replacing confidence. "You're wasting everyone's time." I glanced at him. "You said that about me once before. Different place, same mistake." He blinked, confused. "What are you talking about?" "Doesn't matter," I said softly. "You'll remember soon." The tension in the room deepened. Even the background chatter had faded. All that remained was the hum of fluorescent light and the sound of my pulse, slow and even. 1 minute. Valora's voice trembled now. "Brooklyn, whatever point you're trying to make, please stop." I turned toward her. "If you really wanted me to stop, you'd have listened years ago." She flinched as though struck. Brandon gave a sharp laugh. "You think you can scare us by standing here? What happens in 5 minutes, huh?" I tilted my head. "You'll see." The words came out calm, but they landed with weight. The clock on the wall ticked once more. The sound echoed like a promise. Brandon opened his mouth to speak again, but just then, the faint chime of the glass doors rang through the room. Everyone turned. I didn't. The door chimed, slicing through the tension like the first crack in a storm. The sound was small, but in that quiet room it carried weight. Every head turned toward the entrance, as if the air itself had shifted. I stayed still, letting my pulse settle into something steady, something deliberate. Ronan Bexley stepped inside with his usual precision, tall, composed, the kind of man who measured respect and eye contact. His clipboard was tucked beneath one arm, his gaze sweeping the showroom with practiced detachment. The staff straightened, their postures tightening into professionalism. They didn't know what was about to unravel. Brandon moved first. He approached Ronan with forced confidence. "Sir, glad you're here. We've got a bit of a situation. Someone wandering around without an appointment. Probably lost." I turned slowly, meeting Ronan's eyes across the space. For a second, there was nothing, just polite confusion. Then something flickered, recognition tugging at the edges of his memory. He froze. I saw it hit him, the same way it hit everyone who underestimated me. His voice softened, uncertain now. "Ma'am, may I ask your name?" Brandon stepped between us before I could answer. "No need, sir. I've got it handled." Ronan frowned. "Handled?" "She was just leaving," Brandon added quickly. I tilted my head, smiling faintly. "Was I?" Ronan's brows knitted. That flicker of memory brightened. I could almost see it behind his eyes, the last time he'd seen me, standing in a conference room years ago, back when he was still a regional sales manager and I was just a consultant. He'd told me I was too intense to lead. I'd thanked him for his advice. 3 months later, I'd bought the company he worked for. Now, he looked at me like a man realizing the ghost he'd buried had learned to breathe again. I took a slow step forward. "We've met," I said softly. "But it's all right if you don't remember. You weren't supposed to." His throat bobbed. "Brooklyn Hale." The name hung in the air like a verdict. Brandon blinked, laughing nervously. "Wait, what?" Ronan didn't answer him. He just straightened his posture, clipboard forgotten in his hand. "She used to call me too intense," I murmured, almost to myself. "Now I own everything she sells." Sable's voice cut through the tension before Brandon could speak again. "Ronan." Her tone shifted instantly, saccharine, playful. She glided toward him, every step measured like choreography. Her fiancé followed a step behind, smiling with the smug charm of a man who'd never been told no. "Hi," Sable said brightly, reaching out to touch Ronan's sleeve. "We were just talking about expanding the showroom inventory. Isn't that exciting?" Ronan managed a stiff smile. "Very." Sable turned to me, feigning surprise. "Oh, you're still here?" "Yes," I said, my tone flat. She laughed lightly. "Of course you are. You always did love hovering where the action is." Her fiancé stepped closer then. When his face came into focus, the breath left my lungs. Mark Everhart. The name rose in my mind before I could stop it. My stomach tightened with a memory, dim dorm hallway light, the smell of rain-soaked textbooks, his hand covering mine as he whispered about building something together. "Brooklyn," he said slowly. His voice was the same, smooth and careful. "It's been a long time." I nodded once. 12 years. Sable's smile faltered, confusion flickering across her face. "You two know each other?" I answered before he could. "We went to Stanford together. He was studying finance." Her eyes narrowed, suspicion masked behind politeness. "Oh? Small world." Mark shifted, tugging at his collar. "Yeah, small world." I didn't miss the way he avoided my eyes. The last time I'd seen him, he'd asked me to give up my own project to join his. He'd said, "You're brilliant, but you need someone who can lead." I'd walked away without a word. And now he stood next to my sister, wearing the same expression of borrowed confidence. They didn't just steal my spotlight, I thought. They filled it with men I refused to follow. Valora appeared behind them, her voice calm but urgent. "Can we please not make a scene? Sable, honey, you have nothing to prove." I turned to her. "Neither do I." She bristled. "That's not what this looks like." I smiled. "What does it look like, then?" Before she could answer, Brandon cleared his throat. "We're proud to support local families," he said loudly, eager to regain control of the room. "Especially ones who represent real legacy." His words rang false, coated in flattery. He was performing for Ronan now, desperate to recover ground. I turned to him, letting silence stretch before I spoke. "Then you'll love what comes next." He frowned. "What's that supposed to mean?" Ronan's gaze darted between us. He was pale now, the weight of recognition settling in. Valora sighed dramatically. "Brooklyn, enough. You've embarrassed us enough for one day." Sable touched Mark's arm, her tone icy. "We don't have time for her games." Mark's eyes flicked to mine again, but I didn't give him the chance to speak. This isn't a game, I said softly. This is history repeating itself, and ending here. Sable's voice rose. You think you're better than me because you have a job? You always did think you were the smart one. Newsflash, you're not. I laughed quietly. You're right. I'm not smart. Just patient. She blinked, thrown off balance. What's that supposed to mean? 5 minutes, I said. That's all it ever takes. Ronan swallowed hard. Brooklyn. Don't, I interrupted gently. You've already said enough. Brandon looked between us, confused, the power dynamic shifting faster than he could follow. The smugness that had fueled him all morning drained from his face. Sable crossed her arms. I don't know what you're planning, but this little show is pathetic. Belora's voice trembled, the edges of control slipping. Brooklyn, please stop. I met her eyes, the woman who had spent years teaching me that silence was survival. You once told me I should know my place, I said softly. Maybe it's time you see what it looks like from the other side. A heavy stillness settled over the room. The staff stood frozen, unsure which side to choose. Ronan exhaled, his voice lower now, almost reverent. You built this place. I nodded once. Yes. Sable shook her head in disbelief. No, you didn't. You can't just say things like that. Brandon muttered, she's lying. Ronan straightened. She's not. The silence that followed felt electric. I could see the realization flicker through them one by one, first confusion, then denial, then dawning fear. Mark's voice broke through it, soft, almost pleading. Brooklyn, why didn't you ever tell them? Because I wanted to see how far they'd go without knowing, I said quietly. And you didn't disappoint. Belora's hands trembled around her purse. This isn't funny. You're not making sense. I looked at her gently. It doesn't have to make sense to you anymore. Brandon took a step forward, his tone nervous now. If this is some kind of threat. Not a threat, I interrupted. Just a fact. I walked toward Ronan, each step slow, deliberate. He didn't move. For years, he had looked down on me. Now, he lowered his gaze first. The room held its breath. I stopped a few feet away from him, the weight of the moment pressing on everyone like gravity. Do you remember me now? I asked softly. He nodded once. The acknowledgement hung between us, quiet, heavy, unshakable. Behind me, Sable's voice cracked. What is going on? I didn't answer. Some things are better left for them to realize in silence. Ronan didn't speak at first. The color drained from his face as though someone had pulled the ground out from under him. For a long second, all I heard was the faint buzz of the showroom lights and the pulse beating in my own ears. Then the realization hit him fully, he blinked, straightened, and whispered my name as though it had been buried in his throat for years. Brooklyn Hale, he said, the words catching. Dr. Hale. Founder and Chief Executive Officer of Reed Automotive. The room went silent. It wasn't the polite kind of silence that fills the gaps between sentences, it was the heavy kind, the kind that settles in people's bones. Belora's voice cut through it, uncertain and trembling. Wait, you two know each other? Ronan nodded slowly, his eyes still fixed on me. We've met, he said. She owns this place. Sable's fiancé stiffened beside her, the confidence draining from his posture. My mother blinked rapidly, as though her mind refused to process the words. Brooklyn, she started, her tone thin, nervous. What kind of nonsense? Ronan turned toward her, his voice firmer now. Ma'am, this is no mistake. This entire showroom, this entire regional branch, belongs to Dr. Hale. The sound of my full name carried through the space like thunder contained in a whisper. Brandon's smirk faltered. Zinnia, the receptionist, gasped softly, her hand flying to her mouth. I could see the panic ripple across their faces as the hierarchy they'd built in their minds flipped upside down. I didn't gloat. I didn't need to. I simply walked to the counter where my card still lay hidden beneath crumpled receipts in the trash. The motion was quiet, deliberate. I reached in, retrieved the card, and brushed off a speck of dust. The black surface caught the light. CEO, I read aloud. Regional oversight. Primary shareholder. No one moved. No one breathed. My voice stayed low, even. For years, I was the one no one believed in. That gave me time to build an empire. The weight of the truth didn't need volume, it had gravity. Sable broke the silence first. That's not possible, she said, her laugh brittle. You can't just walk in here and what? I asked. Exist? She faltered. Mark tried to intervene, his voice too soft to matter. Let's not overreact, Sable. I looked at him briefly. You always did like calm chaos, didn't you? Watching the fire but pretending you weren't the one who lit it. He looked away. My mother's tone turned sharp, desperate. You could have told us, she said. All these years, you let us think. What? I interrupted. That I failed? That I disappeared like you wanted me to? Her lips trembled. That's not fair. Neither was burning my future, I said quietly. Brandon stepped forward, his voice unsteady. So what? You're saying you're our boss? No, I said. I'm saying I'm your standard. His face paled. Ronan cleared his throat, the only one brave enough to move. Dr. Hale, he said carefully, I had no idea you were conducting an on-site visit today. Had I known, you would have treated me differently, I finished for him. He hesitated. Yes. That's the problem. The words hung there, heavier than any reprimand. I turned back to the staff, scanning each face. Every one of you looked at me and saw someone unworthy of respect. Not because I was rude. Not because I didn't belong. But because I didn't look like you expected someone of power to look. No one argued. No one could. Valora took a shaky step forward. Brooklyn, this isn't you, she said. You're being cruel. I faced her fully. Cruelty is laughing at someone you think is beneath you. I'm just reflecting it back. She flinched as though the truth itself had teeth. Ronan finally lowered his clipboard, setting it on the counter. I'll have this branch's report on your desk by Monday, Dr. Hale. Thank you, I said simply. The others just stared. Brandon muttered something under his breath, but his voice shook. You could have said something earlier. And ruined the lesson? I asked. No. I needed you to show me who you really were. Zinnia's cheeks burned red, she turned toward her computer as though it could hide her shame. Nor, the young employee who hadn't laughed earlier, stood still, her eyes wide but clear. I gave her a small nod. She nodded back. My mother tried again, her voice cracking. Why would you come here just to humiliate us? I didn't, I said. You did that the moment you decided respect had a dress code. Sable's mascaraed eyes glistened with something between anger and disbelief. You can't talk to Mom like that. I just did. She stepped forward, voice rising. You think this changes anything? You're still alone, Brooklyn. I smiled gently. There's peace in being alone. You should try it. For a moment, her expression softened, then hardened again into resentment. Ronan shifted his stance. Would you like me to handle terminations for the staff involved? Brandon blanched. Terminations? I looked at Ronan, then at Brandon. No. Let them stay. They'll remember this better if they live with it. Zinnia swallowed hard, tears welling. I'm sorry, she whispered. Don't be, I said softly. Just do better next time. Respect is free. It's the only currency that never depreciates. My voice carried through the stillness, and I could see heads bow slightly, some in shame, some in admiration. Mark exhaled, running a hand through his hair. You really built all of this? Yes, I said. Every wall, every contract, every decision they dismissed me for. He nodded slowly. I didn't know. You didn't want to. Valora's tone turned pleading. Brooklyn, please, let's talk privately. You can't just. I cut her off. There's no conversation left to have, Mom. You taught me to keep my head down. Today I'm keeping it high enough for the both of us. Sable's voice was quieter now, fragile. Why didn't you tell us sooner? Because you never asked, I said. The quiet that followed was almost holy. I stepped closer to the counter, the marble cold beneath my palms. For years, I worked in silence. I learned how to let people underestimate me. I built while they gossiped. And now, I don't need to explain anything to anyone. Brandon muttered again, unbelievable. I met his eyes. No. Predictable. My mother pressed a hand to her temple. What will people think when they hear this? I almost laughed. Maybe they'll think you raised someone extraordinary. The truth startled even me. Ronan finally broke the stillness. Is there anything else you'd like to add, Dr. Hale? I looked at the watch on my wrist. 5 minutes exactly. Yes, I said softly. We're done here. He nodded. I took one last look around. The same marble floor that had mirrored my humiliation hours ago now reflected something entirely different. The woman staring back wasn't invisible. She was inevitable. Every face in that room was a reminder that perception is fragile, easily shattered by a single truth. I turned toward the exit, the faint tick of my watch marking the end of something larger than pride. And right on time, I whispered. Ronan was still processing when I turned away from him. I didn't need him to respond. His silence told me everything I needed: confirmation, apology, and finally, deference. Not because I demanded it, but because I earned it, brick by silent brick. I took a slow step toward Brandon. His face was paler now, the cockiness completely drained, replaced by confusion and something that looked like fear. You told him I was loitering? Ronan's voice had sharpened behind me. Brandon's mouth opened. I didn't know who she was. She didn't announce herself. You didn't ask, I said before Ronan could say another word. That was your mistake. I stopped a foot away from Brandon. He didn't step back, but I could see his body language coil like a trap that had suddenly been snapped shut. I'm not here to destroy your job, I said quietly. Not today. But understand this, some punishments don't need paperwork. Just clarity. Brandon blinked, unsure how to respond. I didn't wait for him to find the words. I walked right past him without another glance. Didn't touch him. Didn't need to. That's the thing about power, it doesn't have to yell. Behind me, I heard Sable's heels click sharply against the floor. She hissed my name like a warning. So this was your plan? Humiliate us in public? I turned, slowly. Her cheeks were flushed with indignation, but I saw something else underneath: panic. No, I replied calmly. This was my plan to never be humiliated again. She laughed bitterly. You think this changes anything? You still don't have what I have. I tilted my head. You're right, I said softly. I don't have to pretend anymore. The words landed heavier than a scream. Mark shifted beside her, uncomfortable now that the crowd wasn't laughing. He opened his mouth, but Sable shoved his hand off her waist. You always thought you were better than us. Just because you got some degrees and bought a building, so what? You're still alone. My voice didn't rise. You're right again. I am alone. But it's the kind of alone that comes after you stop begging to be included. She stepped forward, finger pointing. You're a coward, Brooklyn. You cut everyone off and then come back here to make us look bad. Real mature. I didn't have to cut anyone off, I said. You made sure I never belonged in the first place. For a second, she looked stunned. Then her voice cracked. You didn't even show up to my engagement dinner. You didn't invite me. A beat of silence passed. Her lip trembled, just slightly. You wouldn't have come anyway, she muttered. Maybe not, I said, but I would have appreciated the choice. Valora finally spoke. Sable, enough. Her voice was quiet, almost worn down. I turned toward her, and for the first time, I saw her not as my mother, but as a woman scrambling to keep up appearances. I raised you to be strong, she said. No, I corrected gently. You raised me to be silent. And I've finally unlearned it. The room had thinned out now. Some customers had left. Others stayed, pretending to admire vehicles but clearly listening. A man near the Aventador leaned toward his wife and whispered, "That's how you deal with snakes." I heard it, but I didn't flinch. I didn't gloat either. I simply turned back to Ronan. Let's continue. This branch needs a leadership overhaul. His eyes steadied. Yes, ma'am. I'll begin the evaluation this afternoon. Sable stared at me, face twisted in disbelief. Then, without another word, she spun on her heel and stormed out. Mark hesitated, looked between me and Valora, then followed her with a half-hearted apology muttered under his breath. Valora remained, her back straight, but her shoulders dropped half an inch. The act was slipping. She took a slow breath. You made your point. This wasn't a point, I said gently. It was the truth. Her eyes glistened, but she blinked the moisture away. You know how this looks, right? I know exactly how it looks, I replied. For once, so does everyone else. I didn't offer comfort. I didn't offer blame. She stood quietly, clutching her purse like it could shield her from shame. She didn't walk out, not yet. I walked away, not after them, but toward the front desk. Nor was still standing there, her hands folded tightly, expression unreadable but steady. As I approached, she met my eyes. I could see the conflict in her. She wasn't proud of how her coworkers had acted. She hadn't participated, but she hadn't stopped it either. "It's okay," I said softly. "Silence is a survival tactic." "I know." Her throat worked to swallow something thick. "I'm sorry," she said, almost a whisper. I nodded. "Let's talk later." She blinked, surprised. "Me?" I smiled. "Yes. This branch needs people who know what it means to listen." Her posture straightened by an inch. Brandon, still lingering near the center display, looked like he wanted to melt into the floor. I didn't address him again. That silence was its own sentence. As I passed the Huracan one last time, I traced my gaze over its lines, not with longing, but with ownership. Not of the car. Of my story. As I reached the front desk, I heard the quiet shuffle of paper behind me, the soft clink of keys being dropped, and the way silence reshaped itself when shame walks in. I didn't look back. I had done everything I came here to do. What came next wasn't revenge. It was structure. I stopped in front of Noor, the only one who hadn't laughed, hadn't whispered, hadn't aligned herself with the performance of cruelty. She looked startled when she realized I was standing in front of her. Her hands were clasped in front of her stomach, fingers fidgeting with the edge of a sticky note. I spoke gently. "Noor Divine, right?" She blinked. "Yes, ma'am." "You didn't laugh," I said. "You didn't whisper. You didn't need to agree with me to still be decent." Her cheeks flushed. "I didn't know who you were." I held up a hand, not to stop her, but to quiet the guilt she didn't need to carry. "You didn't know," I said softly. "But you knew enough to stay kind." I reached into my bag and pulled out a small envelope. Inside was a business card, not the generic one I'd handed earlier, but the one with my embossed seal, the kind that went to people I saw as part of something real. I slid it across the counter. She stared at it, eyes widening as she read. "Assistant floor manager? Effective immediately," I said. "I'm pulling this branch out of autopilot. And I need people who understand that professionalism doesn't start when the client looks rich." She opened her mouth, but I continued. "You'll have support. Training. Authority. I want you to be better than the people who taught you how not to see." The room was quiet again, but it felt different this time. Not tense, watchful. Respectful. "Thank you," Noor whispered. I smiled gently. "Make it worth it." She nodded. "I will." It wasn't a spotlight moment. It was quieter than that. More honest. The kind of moment that reminded me why I started this work in the first place. Legacy isn't just about what you build. It's about who gets to build next. 1 month later, I received a letter. Not an email. Not a text. A real, handwritten letter, heavy paper, the kind with weight to it. The envelope was unmarked, but I knew the handwriting immediately. It was my mother's. "If you have anything left for your mother, please come." That was all it said. No date. No location. Just a sentence. A question hiding inside a command. I waited a few days. Thought about ignoring it. Then one Saturday, I found myself driving down Highway 287, the stretch I used to take back from college interviews. The diner sat just off the shoulder, the same as I remembered, faded blue paint, a cracked Coca-Cola sign in the window. She was already there when I walked in. She looked smaller than I remembered. Not older, necessarily, just compressed. Like guilt had settled into her bones and made everything tighter. She stood when she saw me, smile stretched too wide. "Brooklyn." I didn't sit immediately. I looked at the table. 2 coffees, no cream. She remembered how I drank it. I slid into the booth without a word. She tried first with nostalgia. "You used to stop here after AP exams. Remember? You always ordered cherry pie, even though you hated cherries." I nodded. "It was the crust I liked." She laughed softly. "I never understood that." We sat in silence for a moment. She reached for her cup but didn't drink. "I saw the video," she said finally. "The one from the showroom." I stirred my coffee. It wasn't meant to go viral. Her eyes watered. "People said horrible things in the comments. About me. About our family." I looked at her then. "Everything they said came from watching how you treated me." She wiped under one eye, careful not to smudge her makeup. "I didn't know you were hurting that much." Yes, you did. She flinched. I didn't mean to. You did, I said. But it's okay. Because you meant to love me too. You just didn't know how to do both. Her hand trembled on the table. You don't know what it was like for me. Trying to keep everything together. Your father wasn't strong. Sable needed so much. You chose her, I said, my voice quiet. Every time, you chose her. I had to pick someone. No, I said. You didn't. You just had to stop pretending I could carry all the weight and still smile. We were both quiet again. I reached into my purse and pulled out a small envelope. Set it on the table between us. She stared at it. What is this? Something I kept for a long time, I said. She opened it slowly. Inside was a photograph, me at 6 years old, sitting on Dad's lap, holding a toy wrench. His arm wrapped around me, and on the back of the photo, in his messy print, were the words, "Keep building." She looked up at me, her mouth trembling. I don't want anything else, I said. No inheritance. No letters. No rewrites. Tears slipped down her cheeks. You're still my daughter. I smiled, gently. Then you should have protected me like one. Her face crumpled. I don't need an apology, I added. I needed the space to finally stop waiting for one. I slid out of the booth and stood. The diner was quiet. A few other patrons watched us with passive curiosity. She stayed seated, staring at the photo like it held more than memory, like it held regret. Outside, the sun had dipped low enough to cast long golden streaks across the parking lot. I took a slow breath and let it fill my lungs fully for the first time in weeks. I wasn't angry. Not anymore. Just clear. And that kind of clarity is its own kind of freedom. The diner door closed behind me with a quiet click, and the sound carried farther than it should have. The air smelled of gasoline and sun-baked asphalt. My shoes scraped softly against the gravel as I crossed the parking lot toward my car. The sunlight was fading now, spilling gold across the highway, washing everything in a color that felt both warm and final. When I reached the driver's seat, I didn't start the engine. I just sat there, hands on the steering wheel, breathing. For the first time in years, there was no noise in my head, no rehearsed explanations or imaginary arguments. The silence felt full instead of empty. At home, the apartment greeted me with its familiar stillness. The walls were bare except for one framed print of a 1960s blueprint, an old Lamborghini design I'd studied when I first dreamed of engineering. I turned on a single lamp, soft light touching the corners of the room. I walked to the shelf where a small wooden box sat tucked between my books. I had avoided opening it for months. Maybe years. My fingers brushed the lid before I lifted it. Inside was the bracelet. The silver had dulled slightly over time, the engraving almost worn smooth, "Don't shrink." My father had given it to me when I was 16, the day he realized I was going to be more like him than anyone else in the house. You'll build things, he'd said. But the world will try to make you smaller first. Don't let them. I ran my thumb over the words until the metal warmed under my skin. Then I smiled, gently, and reached for a padded envelope on my desk. I slipped the bracelet inside, sealing it carefully. On the front, I wrote, "For Noor. One day, you'll understand what this really means." I set it beside the outgoing mail. I didn't need to carry him anymore to honor him, I whispered to the quiet apartment. I became the legacy he would have believed in. The next morning, the office was busier than usual. Phones rang, conversations overlapped, and the smell of coffee lingered in the air. Noor greeted me at the door, her posture straighter than before, her eyes bright with the kind of pride that comes from finally being seen. "Morning, Dr. Hale," she said. "Morning, Noor," I replied. She hesitated. "About yesterday's meeting, I'm nervous. I've never managed people before." "You'll learn," I said softly. "Good leaders don't start by knowing everything. They start by listening." Her shoulders eased. "I'll remember that." As she walked away, I saw the mail carrier stop by the front desk. The envelope with the bracelet disappeared into his stack. Legacy moves quietly. That afternoon, Ronan called to update me on the branch. Brandon had resigned, citing professional differences. Zinnia had transferred to another dealership. Sable's wedding had been postponed, indefinitely. And my mother? Ronan didn't mention her. He didn't have to. I already knew the silence around her was louder than any gossip could ever be. Her social circle would shrink until only the loyal few remained, people too polite to say out loud what they thought. I didn't post about it. Didn't correct anyone. Didn't share an inspirational quote about forgiveness. The silence said more than vindication ever could. That evening, I returned to my office downtown. The skyline glowed outside the window, glass towers catching the last light of the day. I turned on my lamp, the same warm hue as the one in my apartment. My desk was neatly arranged, reports, letters, a mug still half full of tea. Across the room, a new intern passed by holding a file stamped with my signature. She looked barely 20. The kind of girl who still said yes, ma'am to everyone. She paused at my door. "Dr. Hale, I just wanted to say, it's an honor to work here," she said, nervous but sincere. I smiled. "It's an honor to have you." She left, and her footsteps faded into the hum of the building. For a while, I just sat there, looking out the window. The city stretched endlessly beneath me, alive and unapologetic. I remembered sitting on my parents' porch at 18, wondering if I'd ever feel free. Back then, freedom felt like escape. Now, it felt like presence, being exactly where I was, no longer asking for permission to exist. I closed my laptop and placed it neatly to the side. My reflection stared back at me in the glass, framed by the lights of Dallas. I barely recognized her anymore. She looked calm, composed, older, not in years but in certainty. I used to wonder if success was revenge. Now I knew it wasn't. It was freedom. And freedom doesn't roar. It breathes. I stood and reached for the window latch, pushing it open. The evening air swept in, carrying the smell of rain on distant pavement. Somewhere below, a car engine started, a deep, steady sound that reminded me of those nights in Dad's garage, when he'd tell me that engines had heartbeats too. I leaned against the frame, watching the city lights blink like stars that never got tired. My hands rested on the sill, palms open. Everything that had ever weighed me down had changed shape. It wasn't gone, it had become foundation. I learned quietly, slowly, gently in ways they never imagined. Healing hadn't arrived suddenly. It happened softly, step by step. The wind brushed my face. I didn't close the window. The city breathed. And for once, so did I. Sometimes, silence doesn't mean surrender. It means you've outgrown the noise. If you've ever had to walk back into a room that once tried to erase you, tell me, what would you say? Let me know in the comments below. And if this story spoke to something in you, don't forget to subscribe. There's more where this came from. Stories that whisper the truth. Until it echoes.